In the vast, chaotic graveyard of found footage horror, one ghost still lingers quietly, terrifying anyone who stumbles upon it. Noroi, the Curse. Directed by Koji Shiraishi, Noroi never received a wide international release, and for years was only accessible through bootleg DVDs or shady torrent sites. But despite, or perhaps because of, its obscurity, Noroi has garnered a reputation among horror aficionados as one of the most genuinely unsettling entries in the found footage canon. While mainstream audiences remember the Blair Witch Project as the genre's genesis, Noroi shows that found footage didn't begin or end with shaky cam and screaming in the woods. In fact, the roots of this subgenre run deeper, and Noroi might just be its most sophisticated evolution. Most horror fans cite 1999's The Blair Witch Project as the beginning of found footage cinema. And while it certainly put the format on the map, the idea of horror presented through discovered footage predates it by decades. The true origin story starts with 1980's Cannibal Holocaust, an Italian exploitation shocker that presented its gruesome jungle massacre through a documentary team's recovered film reels. The director even had to stand trial for murder in Italy because the film looked so disturbingly real. His actors had signed contracts to disappear for a year to help sell the illusion. But even Cannibal Holocaust had predecessors. The first known movie shot in a found footage style is The Connection, directed by Shirley Clarke in 1961 and based on the 1959 play of the same name by Jack Gelber. The Connection opens with a title card explaining that what we're watching is assembled footage shot by cameraman J.J. Burden. He was working for a well-known documentary filmmaker named Jim Dunn, who has since disappeared. The film follows Dunn as he documents a group of heroin addicts and former jazz musicians in a New York apartment, all waiting for their dealer to arrive. As time passes, Dunn slowly loses his role as the observer and ends up using heroin along with the group. By the end of the film, he tells Burden that the footage now belongs to him and walks off, leaving the camera behind as he fully joins the addicts in their endless wait for the next connection. The Connection set the groundwork for films to explore this new style of the realistic movie. The most unsettling aspect of found footage lies in its illusion of authenticity, a phenomenon often referred to as the documentary effect. These films blur the boundary between fiction and reality by adopting the aesthetic language of real media, home videos, news broadcasts, amateur recordings. This technique creates a sense of authenticity, where the footage looks and feels like truth, even though we know it's fictional. The French theorist Jean Baudrillard's concept of hyperreality is especially relevant here. Found footage doesn't just imitate real life, it becomes a reality more believable than reality itself. Because the footage mimics how we experience actual events, through shaky cam, poor lighting, awkward framing, we instinctively accept it as genuine. The absence of traditional filmmaking staples, no musical score, no sweeping camera movements, no clear editorial hand, further tricks the viewer's brain. We aren't watching a polished horror movie. We're watching something that feels raw and unfiltered. And that perceived rawness is what makes it so unnerving. By stripping away the familiar stylistic cues of fiction, found footage horror forces us to confront terror in a form that looks dangerously real. Released in 2005, Noroi stands apart from most of its Western found footage counterparts. While American found footage horror often leans into chaos, shaky cam, and panic, think Cloverfield or Paranormal Activity, Noroi is deliberate, calm, and disquietingly professional. The film follows Masafumi Kobayashi, a journalist and documentarian known for investigating paranormal events. What begins as a routine investigation into a neighbor's strange behavior slowly spirals into something far more ancient and horrifying, involving a forgotten ritual, psychic children, cursed locations, and the ominous entity known as Kagutaba. The genius of Noroi lies in its realism. It isn't just mimicking handheld footage, it's mimicking a real documentary. The editing is clean. The footage is framed. The structure mirrors an actual investigative report, complete with interview segments, press conferences, and even snippets of bizarre Japanese talk shows. It never tries to convince you it's raw or uncut. Instead, it presents itself as a polished posthumous broadcast of a man's descent into an invisible hell. This approach allows Noroi to do something most found footage horror films fail at. It earns your belief. Because it's not screaming in your face or violently shaking the camera to simulate fear, Noroi lets you sit with the dread. It dares you to lean in closer to catch subtle background movements. It draws fear not from jump scares, but from implication. You begin to feel like you, too, are part of the investigation, and that by watching, you may be cursed as well. There's no frantic pacing, no frantic soundtrack, no screaming violins warning you that something terrifying is about to happen. In fact, the film rarely even raises its voice, and that's exactly what makes it so unnerving. The horror in Noroi simmers just beneath the surface, delivered in static shots, deadpan interviews, and long, quiet moments that seem ordinary until they aren't. There are very few traditional scare cues. Instead of jump scares, you get grainy footage of a child standing silently in the dark, a faint noise in a forest, or a shape barely visible in the corner of a surveillance frame. These moments are not punctuated by music or reaction shots. They're simply presented, as if the film doesn't care whether you notice or not. And that's what makes them so disturbing. This technique taps into a deeper, more existential kind of fear. What we're afraid of isn't the thing jumping out at us. It's the creeping suspicion that something is off, that there's a logic beneath the world we know that doesn't follow human rules. Noroi builds that dread through accumulation. The scares aren't isolated events, they stack. Each quiet, inexplicable moment becomes another brick in a structure you don't realize is being built until you're completely trapped inside it. You could look at this through the lens of slow horror, an idea that prioritizes atmosphere, ambiguity, and emotional decay over spectacle. But Noroi takes it a step further. It uses the formal language of realism, news footage, interviews, raw handheld clips to make that slow horror feel like it's actually happening. The calmness becomes uncanny because it doesn't behave like a horror film. There's no signal that you're in danger, just the dreadful feeling that the danger is already here and has been for a long time. What also sets Noroi apart is its mythology. While many found footage films like Blair Witch, Grave Encounters, or As Above, So Below rely on cryptic symbols or fleeting references to urban legends, Noroi builds a complete and terrifying mythology around Kegutaba. This ancient demon is never seen directly, but his presence infects the entire film. Each new clue, an old ritual, a psychic breakdown, a missing child, feels like peeling away a layer of reality, and the more you learn, the more hopeless the story becomes. The horror in Noroi isn't just that something terrible is happening, it's that it cannot be stopped. Even Kobayashi, the determined investigator, becomes a tragic figure in this narrative. His quest for truth is noble, but misguided. Like many protagonists in Japanese horror, his rational mind is no match for the supernatural. He seeks answers where none exist, and in doing so, he becomes yet another casualty of Kagutaba's curse. The character of Kobayashi is more than a paranormal investigator. He is a documentarian consumed by the pursuit of truth, even as it leads him into darkness. His relentless need to capture every moment on film becomes not only his undoing, but part of the film's deeper horror. This obsessive documentation reflects a broader meta-commentary on media itself, particularly the ethics of those behind the camera. As Kobayashi continues filming, despite increasingly disturbing and dangerous events, the film subtly critiques the compulsion of media professionals to keep recording, regardless of the human cost. In doing so, Noroi turns its lens back on the found footage genre and the audience that consumes it. We, as viewers, are implicated in this voyeurism. We continue watching even as things become morally fraught and emotionally uncomfortable. The film doesn't just scare us. It asks why we are so eager to be scared in the first place, and what it means to seek horror for entertainment when real suffering is at stake. Through Kobayashi's unflinching lens, Noroi reveals the chilling consequences of turning reality into content. Despite its brilliance, Noroi has remained relatively unknown outside hardcore horror circles. For years, it lacked a proper Western release, and its haunting realism made it difficult to market, alongside the more sensationalist found footage films of the 2000s. But this obscurity has only amplified its power. Watching Noroi today feels like discovering something you were never meant to see. And that sensation, that you've stumbled upon cursed media, makes the fear all the more real. As found footage continues to evolve in the digital age, with YouTube horror channels and analog horror now picking up the mantle, Noroi remains a landmark. It's not the loudest entry in the genre, nor the most famous, but it's the most chilling. It doesn't just show you horror, it makes you live in it. So if you're brave enough, seek it out, but be warned. Noroi doesn't end when the credits roll. Like its cursed footage, it lingers, long after the screen goes dark.